The wind swept the dust from the main street, as if trying to erase the footprints of those who had passed by before. The small town of Red Creek seemed suspended in time. A few creaking wooden buildings, a saloon lit by oil lamps, and a church bell that never rang after sunset. That night, however, something was different. A black horse stopped in front of the saloon, breathing heavily, vapor escaping from its nostrils in the cold desert air. The man who dismounted wore a worn hat and a long overcoat that hid half his body. No one on the street said anything. In the Old West, silence sometimes spoke louder than any conversation. Inside the saloon, the pianist paused for a moment when the door opened and everyone looked. The stranger walked slowly to the bar and asked, in a low voice, for whiskey. The bartender served him without asking his name. It was a rule in that place, because those who asked too many questions often ended up buried early. The man drank half the glass in one gulp. In the corner of the room, 3 men were playing cards. One of them slowly raised his eyes. He had a scar across his face and a crooked smile that seemed permanent. Leaning slightly toward the other 2, he murmured that he knew that man. The stranger remained with his back turned, but his eyes moved in the mirror behind the bar. He had seen those 3 before, and that meant trouble. The scarred man rose from the table and said loudly that it was none other than Daniel Hayes. The room fell completely silent, and the name echoed like a gunshot. Daniel turned slowly and replied that he thought those men had died in Silver Canyon. The 2 beside the scarred man began to laugh and answered that they had almost died, but before that happened they had decided something. They were going to find him. One of them already had his hand near the revolver. Daniel sighed, as if remembering an old story he would rather forget. He said he'd only come to buy a new horse and a little peace. The scarred man smiled and replied that Daniel had chosen the wrong town. The tension grew so heavy it felt as if the air inside the saloon had stopped moving. The pianist slowly closed his instrument. Daniel placed his glass on the counter with a sharp clack and calmly offered them one last chance. Sit back down and finish the card game. Instead, the scarred man drew his revolver. Daniel was already moving. The first shot echoed through the hall like thunder. A lamp swayed, a table overturned, and someone screamed. As the gunpowder smoke began to dissipate, a body fell to the floor, but it was not the one everyone expected. In that instant, Daniel realized something worse than 3 gunmen. Someone in town had set a trap for him, and the person behind it had not even shown up yet. Outside, in the darkness of the street, a silhouette watched everything with a rifle resting on its shoulder and a cold smile on its face. The figure whispered that it had taken Daniel long enough. The story of Red Creek was only beginning, and the worst was yet to come. The saloon door was still shaking when a second shot rang out. The bullet pierced the window and lodged in the wood behind Daniel. Someone shouted that there was a sniper. The saloon erupted in chaos as tables overturned. People threw themselves to the floor and bottles shattered at the bar. Daniel rolled behind a thick support pillar just as another shot shattered glass and tore a piece from the brim of his hat. Peering through the crack in the door, he saw the silhouette across the street on the roof of the old warehouse, holding a long rifle. Moonlight revealed a calm, precise posture. Whoever it was, they were not an amateur. Daniel muttered that this was more than a simple ambush. The scarred man was still alive on the floor, clutching his bloodied shoulder and saying that Daniel had brought hell with him. Daniel aimed his revolver at him and demanded to know who was outside, but the man only laughed and spat blood, promising he would find out soon enough. Another shot pierced the saloon wall and shattered a bottle behind the bar, spilling whiskey across the floor while the bartender crawled away. Daniel realized he needed to leave, but the shooter outside had a perfect view of the street. So he did something unexpected. He grabbed a lamp. The scarred man shouted a warning, but it was too late. Daniel smashed the lamp onto the floor. The glass shattered. The spilled whiskey ignited instantly, and flames began spreading through the saloon. Customers ran in panic as smoke rose toward the ceiling. From the rooftop, the sniper narrowed his eyes and murmured that it was clever. Using the chaos, Daniel slipped outside with the fleeing crowd. The moment he stepped onto the street, the metallic click of a rifle echoed. A voice in the shadows between 2 buildings told him not to take another step. Daniel froze as a woman slowly emerged from the darkness, wearing a black hat and leather coat, her eyes cold as steel. She held a repeating rifle pointed directly at his chest. Daniel recognized her immediately, and the recognition twisted his stomach. It was Clara. She tilted her head and said it had been a long time. The fire from the saloon illuminated half of her face. Daniel said he thought she had died in Silver Canyon. She smiled faintly and replied that he had left too many people to die that day. Above them, the sniper continued watching. Daniel realized this was not just an ambush but a trial. Clara cocked her rifle and explained that Red Creek had not been chosen by chance. Everyone who had survived the massacre of Silver Canyon was there that night. Footsteps began to echo through the street as doors opened and the sound of weapons being cocked filled the air. Figures emerged from the shadows. 1, 2, 5, 8 men in total, each staring at Daniel with the same expression of ancient hatred. Clara spoke calmly and said the real question was not whether Daniel would die that day, but how long he would manage to survive. The wind blew strongly through the burning street as Daniel slowly reached for his holster, studying every face, every weapon, and every possible escape. Then he said something that made Clara frown. He told her she did not really know who had started the massacre at Silver Canyon. Silence fell over the street, and even the wind seemed to stop. Clara tightened her grip on the rifle and asked if those were his last words. Daniel replied that they were not his last words, but his first warning. At that exact moment, a third shot echoed through the town, but no one present had fired. The bullet struck one of the men behind Clara directly in the chest, and he collapsed into the dust. Suddenly, it was clear there was someone else in Red Creek, someone who was neither on Clara's side nor Daniel's. From the shadows at the far end of the street, a horse began walking slowly toward them, its rider holding a short rifle. Clara whispered in confusion, asking who it was. Daniel said nothing, because he had already recognized the horse, and that meant something impossible. The man approaching should have been dead for 10 years. The horse moved slowly through the street illuminated by the burning saloon, each step raising small clouds of dust. No one fired. Not Clara, not the men around her, not the sniper on the roof. Everyone was trying to understand who the rider was. When he finally passed through the glow of the flames, his face became visible. A gray beard, a scar on his chin, and eyes hard as stone. Daniel took a deep breath and said the name Samuel. Some of the men exchanged uneasy glances while Clara frowned and insisted that Samuel Carter had died in Silver Canyon. The rider answered hoarsely that he had almost died. Silence returned. Clara shifted her rifle toward the newcomer and asked if he had decided to show up only now. Samuel looked at the bodies on the ground and at the burning saloon and replied that it seemed he had arrived just in time. Daniel stepped forward and said he had seen Samuel fall that day. Samuel spat in the dust and replied that Daniel had seen many things that day, but not everything. The gunman on the roof finally interrupted, declaring that there had been enough talk. His rifle lowered to fire, but before he could pull the trigger, Samuel's shotgun roared. The man on the roof was thrown backward and disappeared into the darkness. Instantly, the street exploded into gunfire. Clara dug behind a barrel, while her men opened fire. Daniel drew his revolver and fired 3 quick shots. One man fell, another screamed and clutched his leg. Samuel calmly reloaded his shotgun with terrifying composure, murmuring that he had waited 10 years for this moment. Another shot thundered. Another man fell. The entire fight lasted less than a minute. When the gunfire finally stopped, the street was filled with smoke and bodies. Only 3 people remained standing: Daniel, Samuel, and Clara. The saloon continued burning behind them. Clara slowly stood with her rifle still in hand, her eyes shifting from one man to the other. She said quietly that now she understood. Daniel asked what she meant, but she pointed her rifle at Samuel and accused him of always being good at manipulating people. Samuel gave a small, tired smile and said he was glad someone had finally noticed. Daniel turned slowly and demanded to know what they were talking about. Clara answered first: Silver Canyon. She explained that Daniel had not been the one who started the massacre. Samuel tilted his head and said that after 10 years, the truth always surfaced. Daniel felt his blood run cold and reminded Samuel that he had claimed the town was empty. Samuel nodded and admitted that he had lied. The fire from the saloon crackled in the background as Clara continued, Samuel had needed someone to take the blame, and Daniel had been the perfect choice. Daniel gripped his revolver and asked why. Samuel answered with a single word: gold. He pointed toward the distant mountains and explained that Silver Canyon hid an entire secret mine, and he had needed everyone to flee or die. Clara slowly lowered her rifle, realizing that for 10 years they had hunted the wrong man. Samuel sighed and said it had been a complicated story, but now they could finally end it. He raised his rifle, but Daniel was faster. 2 shots rang out. Samuel staggered and dropped his weapon. The old gunslinger looked down at the blood seeping between his fingers and chuckled softly, saying he had always known it would end that way. Still, he said it had been worth it. Samuel Carter collapsed into the dust of Red Creek. Silence followed. Only the crackling fire and the wind remained. Clara stared at the body for a few seconds before slowly putting away her rifle. She murmured that 10 years had passed. Daniel said nothing. Dawn was beginning to lighten the horizon. Clara mounted a horse tied near the town well and, before leaving, asked Daniel what he would do now. He looked at the empty street, the bodies, and the burning saloon. Then he placed his hat back on his head and answered that he would keep walking. Clara nodded and said perhaps they would meet again someday. Daniel replied that maybe they would. She turned her horse and rode out of town. Daniel remained alone in Red Creek as the sun rose over the desert. He mounted his black horse and followed the dirt road away without looking back. In the Old West, some stories end, but legends keep riding.